I did promise you in a previous video, and if you haven't seen it, there's a link below here, which is about the Rothenberg heat gun. I was going to tell you whether I'd managed to get these nuts off easy enough or not, and I can report to tell you that they came off really easy. You've got the M16 and also M12 bolts, which were undone as easy as butter, so there you go. Okay, hello and welcome once again to a video series with the Land Rover Toolbox videos, and we're helped along the way with Power Weld and Arkwright welding supplies. Okay, so we're going to continue with the chassis, and we did hit a little bit of a problem, which I'm going to explain to you a bit later in the video. You can probably see it in the channel there, but yeah, it wasn't as plain sailing as I thought it would be. A little shout out to Fionan and his project that's come together, his welding project and car ramps. Brilliant stuff. And I'd also like to just point out that Neil Enzo and his daughter here, she's this is quite impressive actually, because she's into doing a bit of welding, and her dad's helping her along the way. Neil obviously is quite a competent engineer as well as being an entrepreneur with Forby, and you can see here Jess is doing quite well with a little bit of help. Absolutely fantastic. It's worth getting your children to learn engineering skills. They should never be forgotten at all, and she didn't do too badly there at all, I don't think. What do you think?
Here we go.
I'd just like to give you a heads up also on the fact that Neil has a 4B channel on YouTube, which you should be subscribing to, because he does have quite a few videos, and some of them are restoration videos on the Land Rover 110, especially door repairs. So take a look, there's quite a lot of videos there, and don't forget to subscribe to him. Okay, back to our channel, Land Rover Toolbox videos, and here we have an engineering principle. Okay, you got supports, and with a break in the middle, it's not going anywhere, is it? Now, you wonder why I've got a boot and a cutting disc. Well, what I'm trying to explain to you, and this is about cutting, that is, you need to support your metals when you're cutting for two reasons. One, if the metal falls, it could hurt you, and two, you don't want to nip your disc. The boot is going to be a demonstration. Okay, so say that you only have a 3-axle stands and you're going to cut your steel. Okay, what will happen? Your foot's in the way, it pivots, and bang, smacks you on the foot. It could be even worse. The heavier it is, the worse it's going to fall. The second thing is, if you have the pivot in the wrong place, this is physics here, you cut it and it's going to drop off the other way and go bang. Okay, well, okay, we'll do a delicate drop there. Okay, noisy, huh? And this is the real world. Right, so if you have your metal dropping, it is going to nip up on your grinding blade if you grind from the top downwards. As you can see, as the metal starts to lose strength, it then will nip your blade up. And I'm not going to do this demonstration for real because it can be dangerous. You're going to see a lot of cutting in this video. And when I cut this chassis in half, I'm going to explain how I've achieved this. Basically, the chassis is upside down and I am cutting, and this is already a marked area, is the rails at the bottom through, first of all. And I'm taking myself a relief down the side of the rails as well. Okay, I'll explain why in a little while. That's one rail done, and I've marked the second one out, and I measured this with the tape measure. Basically, what I'm doing is making sure that I can get this cut without having to lift it right up in the air. So I'm going to turn this chassis over in a minute, and I don't have to worry about these cuts at all. So this makes sense, doesn't it? And I'm also making sure I don't have grinder sparks go into next door's garden. Next thing to do was to flip it over so I can get to the top side. Now, it's quite handy here. The way I had it, it managed to sit on the legs of the engine crane so I could move it about. You're better off getting somebody to help you so you can balance the weight of this, because it is actually very heavy. But I'm strong, I'm used to big things, so not a problem. Okay, you can see how easy it was to move the chassis about on the engine crane, and it's strapped in quite well. A couple of markers, guide markers, so I know exactly where I'm going to, and then it's just a matter of cutting where I can't reach at very well. Okay, so that's the inside of the chassis first. The last cut will always wanting to be on the easiest cut so you can step out of the way if needs be. So the finished result is that it has moved, and the cut didn't nip the blade at any point because this is what I was aware of. So it has nowhere far to drop at all, and that's the chassis cut in half. Bit of a pointless exercise if you have no purpose to cut your chassis in half. However, we cut this so we can get it in our workshop, but there's always the option of stretching it, and it is on my mind to put another axle on it. Whether I actually get around to it, I don't know yet. I'd advise doing a dry run with your grinder to make sure that you can get clear, straight cuts without any obstructions. I had to turn this one upside down and move the guard, for instance. And remember, you always unplug it when you move the guard. And this gives me access to it without having to bend the grinder, because you want it at 90 degrees and get it cut. This one along the bottom here, easy to do, and so is the top. You have to remove anything that gets in the way, such as parts of shock absorbers or whatever, and in this case it's this bump stop bracket. Chassis rails are not exactly straight, however you want to use a square or an engineer square wherever you can, and soapstone is the best thing for marking out. Always be aware of where your grinder sparks are going to go, and yeah, okay, if you're spraying them at yourself it's not brilliant, but I've gone over to a full face mask because if you watch very carefully, sparks, even though the guard is there, are still going towards your face, and sparks do not make friends. The other thing which probably you have to consider is the amount of pressure you push to do a cut. The harder you push, the less time your disc is going to last, and of course your angle grinder will suffer as well. Now I'm just going to give you a little bit of weld porn if you like, because I'm absolutely fascinated by sparks. Basically you're taking it quite lightly, let the grinder do the work, let it just control it as it pulls into the metal, and basically you're wanting the grinder to do the leading. So for instance, if I've got it upside down here, okay, if I push it to make a groove and then let it work its way back up, it will pull itself into the metal. Just another warning here, angle grinders are actually very dangerous, so treat them with respect and hold on to them tightly when you're working. You'll find that when you're doing cutting, you'll also overlap cuts. It's okay because you can fill these up with a weld. But it's cut in 1, 2, 3, 4 places at the moment, and we need to do the cut underneath. Just going to put weld cam in position, and it's got a plastic guard on it, so it's not going to burn into the lens, because grinder sparks will melt into glass instantaneously, and if you ever do any grinding in a vehicle, you'll find that your door glass and your windscreen, if you haven't protected them, the grinder sparks will never come out of it. Okay, so this is the final cut, and I'll just take it very lightly and keeping my body right out of the way, letting the grinder dig in and do the work while holding it. And this can actually be a very tiring position, so you get yourself comfortable and then just let the grinder do the work with light pressure onto it. Okay, so this is weld cam, and I'll let you enjoy some of the sparks. And this is where we come unstuck, because this technically should have actually come off, but it is solid. I had to cut a window into the rail to see what was going on, and we do have some gusset plates, some anti-crush plates in place, and you can see this is what's holding it. So I'm going to have to cut the whole of the bottom area off so I can access them and cut them. Now, the thing is, you've got to expect the unexpected. I didn't expect this, however, I did have a tool here, which is an air-powered hacksaw. I'll just get this so you can see it. Doesn't matter what the name is, Snap-on is irrelevant. This is a very handy tool, and it's got me out of trouble so many times. Basically, it's just an air-operated hacksaw. Just means that instead of pushing manually, it's doing the work for you. So we've had to resort to this, which is cut this plate, which is welded solid on both sides, and the air hacksaw has made quite easy work of it. If you're going to have problems and you haven't got oxyacetylene, you have a stick welder, you could use gouging rods, for instance, to cut right the way through this metal so it will release it, because you cannot get an angle grinder in here. So this tool has saved the day, as it were, and we've managed to remove this large piece of section of the chassis, and this was very, very unexpected. Okay, so you can see I did actually start cutting the weld, realised it was welded on the back end because I couldn't see these weld runs at all. So basically this, well, makes you think how this was constructed. I did make a mistake underneath. I took the grinder in to the side too much. Anyway, that's beside the point. What we're going to have to do is find a way to re-weld these back on again, and that's just another thing to do. You'll probably work out that they've fitted all these plates before putting the top and bottom on this chassis. As you can see, the welds are on these bolt tubes, top and bottom. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, the chassis top, okay, this is where it hasn't been weathered. This is the bottom where mud and dirt has sat. The chassis is not corroded at all, and there's hardly any dirt in there. Okay, so there's an old English saying which is forearmed is forewarned. So the next thing to do is get down to the engineers and get ourselves some steel so we can then repair this.